Senna World, I'm your shorter than average girl from down under, and today we're going to be looking at Disney's 1950s Cinderella. Cinderella is statistically the most popular Disney princess in the US, the UK, and Australia. Can't see why. So, glossing over the whole ethnicity thing, because I still believe that everyone deserves a princess that looks like them. A reason why Cinderella could be so popular in these regions is because she is their first exposure to this timeless tale. You know, the original Cinderella story, which exists in one shape or form in every culture. I'm not saying that every culture has a story about a maiden losing her slipper, but I'm talking about the essence of the story that we know. The reason why this particular story has stuck ever since the oldest rendition that we know of, which is 1 year before the Common Era, is because it holds two universal story tropes. Tropes which speak to every one of our humanity. The victory of the underdog, and that good things come with patience and belief. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. But if you're only here for the movie review, then you can skip to the time shown on the screen right now or the timestamp in the description, whichever suits you best. But for now, let's talk story. So Disney's Cinderella is based off Charles Perrault's version of the tale, which was written in 1697. Now, the name Charles Perrault may sound familiar, and that's because we spoke about him when we were talking about Sleeping Beauty, which if you want to see that, you can click on the link up here. But anyway, Perrault's story is arguably a nicer version than the one that we see on the screen. It basically starts the same. Cinderella's father marrying a proud noblewoman who happens to have two daughters, where the oldest daughter is named Charlotte, and we don't really get given the name of the second daughter. But unlike the movie, the father doesn't die. He is still there, but he's basically whipped by his new wife, so he goes along whatever she's doing to Cinderella. Now, although the stepmother is the villain in the story, she doesn't actually show up anywhere except the beginning. She's jealous of her stepdaughter's beauties, her manners, and her patience, 'cause they make her own daughters look bad in comparison, making her feel like she's a bad mother. And so that hits her in the pride. Her resolution, she's going to try and push Cinderella to her limits, to break her, so that she won't be so perfect anymore. But that doesn't work for her. And unfortunately, like mother, like daughters, and they act the same way to their stepsister. They love how she has to live this poorer lifestyle compared to them, and that she has to run around serving them hand and foot. Cinderella had to sleep next to the fireplace, and so whenever she woke up, she had cinders all over herself. And so Charlotte used to call her Cinder Witch, whereas her younger sister felt a bit more sorry for her and called her Cinderella. And then there is the ball, and everyone of fashion was invited to it. So, of course, Cinderella helps her sisters get ready gladly, even giving them advice because she actually has the best sense of style out of them all. But as soon as they leave, Cinderella starts crying, wishing that she could go with them. And that's when the fairy godmother enters the scene. And so she asks Cinderella to get her a few things so she can concoct a plan. These items being a pumpkin, 7 mice, and 6 lizards, which she transformed into a coach with horses, a coachman, and 6 footmen. She then gives Cinderella her dress made of silver and gold and jewels, and of course the infamous glass slippers. Then the whole back before midnight thing is explained, and Cinderella goes off to stop the show. I mean, the ball. Now, there are a few differences with the ball. First of all, it was set out by the prince, not the king, for no certain reason at all. So he wasn't exactly looking for a bride, nor were the ladies of the kingdom going there to impress him. It was just one of those things that the French aristocrats did before it was all ended with the French Revolution. So when Cinderella shows up, she sat next to her sisters and she served them and shared with them all the stuff that the prince was giving her because the prince had his eye on her the entire time. But the sisters had no idea who this girl was. They liked the way that she was treating them a lot. At 11:45, Cinderella leaves, thanks her fairy godmother, and pretends to go to bed. When the sisters come back, she opens the door and they explain to her what happened. The lovely princess that they had met and how they wished that they could see her again. Now, Cinderella kind of tested her sisters to see whether they recognized her or not, but they didn't. So on the next night of the ball, Cinderella rocks up with an even more beautiful dress. And she does the exact same thing as the night before. Dances with the prince and sits with her sisters and serves them. And again, she leaves early and they tell her all about it. But on the third night, Cinderella forgets herself. And so when the clock strikes midnight, she has to run away in a hurry. And of course, this is where the iconic slipper scene happens and Cinderella walks home in her rags. When talking to her sisters this night, they mentioned that the princess had to leave in a hurry for some reason, and that the prince had picked up her glass slipper and was staring at it the entire night. And so he declared that he would marry whoever that glass slipper belonged to. And so comes the shoe fitting. And when the sisters couldn't fit their feet into the slipper, Cinderella asks if she could have a go. And we know how this bit goes. The slipper fits like a glove. Cinderella pulls out its second pair, and then the fairy godmother just shows out of nowhere and turns her into the lady that everyone recognizes as the princess from the ball. The sisters grovel at her feet, apologizing to Cinderella for all their ill treatment towards her, and she hugs them, saying that all she ever wanted was their love. And so Cinderella marries the prince, convinces him to let her sisters live in the palace, and she marries them to 2 lords, so the 3 of them can all live together. And as for the miserable parents, we have no idea what happens to them. So it's a story about sisterly love, not romance. But that can't be said about every version of the story. The oldest version of the Cinderella story is said to date back all the way to ancient Greece. The story of Rhodopus, a courtesan whose sandal is stolen by an eagle and dropped in the lap of the king of Egypt. After searching for its owner, the king ends up marrying Rhodopus, and the rest is history. Quite literally. This story is considered as historical as recorded by the geographer Strabo and the Roman orator Aelian, even going to the extent of mentioning the pharaoh's name as Psammiticus, aka one of the Semitic kings of the 26th dynasty of Egypt. But not all the tales have a shoe involved. Others focus on the young child being abused by their caregiver or living in poverty, and then having the tables turned where they end up being royalty. Some of these tales include the tale of Aspasia and Cyrus from Greece, Siklamfusa from Malta, Tam and Kam from Vietnam, Kongjui and Patjui from Korea, the story of Yi Xian from China, Mah Pishuni from Persia, Abdullah ibn Fadl and his brothers from Alf Layla Layla, and of course the OG Basiles, Cinderella, the one that we talked about, Perrault's Cendrillon, and the Brothers Grimm's Aschenputtel, which in Brothers Grimm's fashion is a lot more gruesome. But that's just a few of the historical versions that we have of the Cinderella story. There are so many newer renditions of the story that we should also acknowledge. Going from the movies, which basically stripped the story to its bare bones and took the title, things like Ella Enchanted and A Cinderella Story, but then others which actually take the essence of Cinderella and give it a cultural twist, like the book Chinese Cinderella or the manga and anime slash Japanese movie My Happy Marriage. So, what makes the story so desirable to us human beings? So much so that we've been wanting to replicate it so many times. Well, it's because we like the tropes that it presents. We can all relate to an underdog becoming a victor because we are all underdogs in one way or another. Being the top of anything in particular means that you're in a very, very small minority, and most of us don't really associate with that. No matter how much we try, we cannot find ourselves in that minority, and maybe for good reason too, which we'll talk about later. So being able to see the underdog coming out victorious and actually receiving what they deserve for all their hard work is a warming and inspiring tale, which fits into the second moral of the story, which is how belief is the motivator of the underdog, which allows them to succeed at the end. Because in all of us, hoping to be better is what we hold on to strive into the future. And we can see that these are the common themes by the fact that each story of Cinderella in the different cultures has a different ending, an ending which represents what success looks like in that culture based off their philosophies. Like in all the Asian versions of Cinderella, she is killed by her stepmother, but then through reincarnation, Cinderella is able to avenge herself and reunite with her prince. In the Middle Eastern versions, the mistreated child is guided spiritually through trials and tribulations, coming out victorious. And this causes their other siblings to get super jealous, and so they attempt to do those same tasks to get the same outcomes, but with damning consequences. And therefore, it displays the truth of their actions by comparing our victorious underdog with their evil family. And finally, the European variations of the story give the damsel a royal title and a romantic partner to compensate for her lack of family when she grew up. And so we see that these results reflect what these cultures believe to be the most rewarding thing. In Asia, it is a better reincarnation. In the Middle East, acknowledgement of one's merits in ethics and knowledge. And in Europe, family and status. But in all versions of the story, the Cinderella character has the same characteristics, which allows us to root for her or him, depending on the story. Having lost her parental figures early on in life, Cinderella was forced to grow up and raise herself, not to mention her stepfamily as well. As a consequence of this, she matures drastically, which allows her to learn patience. However, contrary to what some may believe, patience isn't about accepting the situation that you're in, but it's to persist in doing something which is difficult or unsavory because you know that the outcome would be worth the wait. For someone who accepts a situation which degrades or belittles them, that's not patience, but weakness to stand up for yourself. And so we can see that that's not the state that Cinderella's in, because she disapproves of this treatment that she gets, and she questions the reasoning behind the demands that they're giving her, showing us that she understands her own worth and is not indifferent about the way that her stepfamily is getting their way with their abuse. But she also knows that at the moment she has no power to change things, so she must wait for the right opportunity and the right circumstances. And she wishes that opportunity to arrive each day, being prepared to take it whenever it does. Now this is what belief and hope are. She 100% believes that there is going to be a day where she will be free of this abuse, and she hopes every day that that day would be it. But if it doesn't, then she believes that it'll be the next. And so it is this hope which allows her to endure everything and continue to work. And you know what? The evidence is in the pudding. For when the opportunity does come in the form of a large social event, Cinderella takes it, doing all that she could to make the best of the chance that she has been given. And despite her stepmother trying to thwart her attempts so that she can crush the spirit of the still fighting Cinderella and finally come out victorious in breaking her stepdaughter, that just doesn't happen, because Cinderella rises up to be the victor, even in her lowest point, when her plan has been thwarted and the opportunity seems to be slipping away. Cinderella doesn't lose hope. She stops believing, but never loses hope. And so here we're going to explain the difference between belief and faith. Having belief means that you know that something is true, aka having knowledge about something, whereas faith is trusting something despite not knowing everything that you need to know to believe in it. Now, applying this concept to Cinderella, she believed that her wish of being free would come true, owing to the fact that she was actively trying to work towards that goal. But when she lost her chance to go to the ball, her proceedings from this point had become uncertain. She had been bold in trying to get to the ball, so she has exposed herself to her stepfamily. Now that she has failed, she has no idea of what kind of changes are going to occur, which may hinder her continual attempts to find her freedom. And so she proclaims that she no longer believes. She doesn't believe that she can be free now, which is fine. She doesn't know what the future holds anymore. But when the singers say, "Have faith in your dreams and someday," her reply to them is, "It's just no use." Do you see the slight difference in the wording? The dream, aka the opportunity, has passed, and so it's now in the no. You can't have faith in something that you know already. That doesn't make sense. If you know something, then you should believe in it. And there's no use in believing something that you know is not true. So although it kind of feels like a stretch, Cinderella is a philosophical genius. She understands the difference of her planning, knowing what's going to happen, therefore belief, and being uncertain but still holding on to hope, which is faith. And the reason why I know that Cinderella is this genius is because her faith manifests in the form of the fairy godmother. If she didn't have that hope, the fairy godmother would not have appeared. So despite losing her belief, Cinderella never accepted the fate that her stepmother wanted for her, aka she still had hope. But because now she was in unknown territory, not knowing how her stepmother would react to the boldness of her trying to get out of the situation that she's in, she's had to switch between believing in her dreams coming true to having faith that her dreams will come true. And this faith has to take over to make sure that hope never dies. And this all sounds lovely and everything, but you're probably wondering, what was Cinderella doing to know that she's going to be free? How was she preparing herself? Like, hell, she didn't even make her own dress. The mice did. Well, the answer comes with Cinderella's behavior. Let's look at the animals. Given that they're sentient, we can actually treat them as logical individuals. What Cinderella was doing was creating allies in a place where she was the victim by creating a secure network of supporters which would rally behind her for whatever cause she asked them. She actually had a very strong foundation to her cause. And another thing that Cinderella did was she subdued her enemy by acting so nicely to them, which is part of her personality, but also just doing everything that they're asking without rebellion means that they never really expected this boldness for her. And that's why they were so surprised when she comes down the stairs with that dress on, and later in the end, when she pulls the glass slipper out of her pocket. Because the image that they had in their head of Cinderella was that she was this timid and scared individual, but instead, what Cinderella was brave, strong, and kind. She never allowed them to know what her true feelings are, but of course, she let her allies know. That is the strength in Cinderella. But I will admit there was one moment in the movie where she absolutely slips up, and that is the day after the ball. Unfortunately, Cinderella exposes her true feelings, and that's why the stepmother ends up locking her in her tower. But luckily, because she's got phase one under plan, which is having good supporters and allies, they helped her out with that slight slip up, backing her up and making sure that she secures the victory. But now let's get back to the discussion of faith. The best way that we can explain what Cinderella was going through in that moment is by using another story, one from the Abrahamic religions, the story of Hagar or Hajar alayhi salam. So Hajar is Prophet Abraham's second wife and mother of his first son. When Abraham receives a revelation that he must leave his wife and son in the deserts of Arabia and return back to Levant, Hajar believed in God and accepted to stay alone in the desert with a baby. And so her belief is the thing that kicks in initially. But when she ran out of food and water and she could no longer nurse her baby and her baby was crying, that's when fear started to seep in. And so this promoted her to act. She went searching for food and water between the two mountains of Safa and Marwa, hoping that she would find something there. And so we find her running between mountain to mountain, mirage to mirage, and back to her baby boy, doing everything in her power to try and keep him alive and trusting in God that he will help her so she could feed her son. After 7 laps, Hajar turns to her baby boy and finds a water well beneath his feet, almost like a miraculous repayment for all her efforts. Hope is a very important survival tool. And the reason for that is because hope has prerequisites. Those prerequisites being self awareness and accepting one's limitations. For a person who thinks themselves to be perfect and all powerful, they can't have hope. Because hope means aspiring for the currently unattainable through humility and determination. And someone who thinks that they're all powerful and perfect directly contradicts having something to work for or something to improve. And so that's why in so many versions of the Cinderella story, the antagonist never accomplishes what Cinderella does because they already believe that they are so perfect and that there is nothing that they can improve on. And we see this with the sisters and the stepmother. When they're trying to sing, they think they can sing really well, whereas Cinderella is the one who's actually good at singing, but because of her humility, which is the prerequisite for hope, she never shows them her ability and she never rubs it in their face. And so then going back to the stepsisters, when something goes wrong, they cannot accept that that is their own fault or because of their own limitations. Instead, they need to blame it on someone else. In this situation, Cinderella was always the one being blamed. And so this juxtaposition exists to show us that Cinderella is the beacon of hope in this family household. Just like Hajar alayhi salam, she did what she can with the situation that she was in, waiting for the opportunity to be able to take the next step. With the two forces driving them being the strongest forces in man, the force of fear and the force of hope, having faith that everything will eventually work out, did they finally receive the fruits of all their labors at the end? For Cinderella becoming royalty and for Hajar alayhi salam being the mother of one of the largest nations in the world. For both women, that wasn't the outcome that they necessarily had worked for or the outcome that they had imagined for themselves. Both starting as basically slaves, they conducted themselves with such an air of self-assurance, understanding their own self-worth, that the world gave them what they deserved. And I guess that's the truth, isn't it? No matter how much we work for something or how hard we try, the things that we do get from ourselves aren't as good as the things that we are given because of the way that we have built ourselves. All these stories teach us that the way that we raise ourselves, educate ourselves, and help ourselves to grow is far, far more rewarding than the plans that we set up for ourselves or the milestones that we want to hit. We may have a dream for something and we may aspire to it, but if we don't mold ourselves first to the shape that we need to be to fulfill that dream, we won't get there. It's not just enough to work towards something. We need to be prepared to be that thing that we're working towards because we aren't alone in this world. We're going to be interacting with every piece of it. And so if we want to be something, but we aren't that thing already, how is the world going to accept us in that place? It's kind of like trying to fit the wrong piece of the puzzle in a particular place because we want that puzzle piece to be in that place, although it's not where it belongs at the moment. However, the beautiful thing about the puzzle of the world is that it's malleable. We can change the shape of ourselves to fit in the place that we want to be. And there are places in the world where we do that. For example, our careers. We educate ourselves and go through a secondary or tertiary education to mold ourselves to be able to fit that career pathway that we want. However, there are other things in life where we don't work on ourselves to be able to fit into that mold. For example, relationships or being parents. And so in those situations, we do see that things are crumble, the family falling apart. But Cinderella, she wasn't gonna make that mistake. She was gonna build herself the way that she wanted to be in the future. And so she became smart, patient, caring, confident, brave, and respectful, attributes which would prove her royal capabilities. Building oneself through the balance of hope and fear, which brings rise to patience, belief, and determination ultimately allows an individual to make their dreams come true. Not purely through their own hands, but through also the hands of the world that they're living in, the universe, accepting their role within it. Because we do live in a fluid world. When the world is going to see our merit, they're going to make a place for us to fit in. So Cinderella is actually a really good role model. And I know people these days, they're going to perceive her as weak, vulnerable, anti-feminist, but I kind of think they're missing the point. A girl doesn't have to act like a man to be a feminist icon, nor does she have to be rude or speak her mind or rebel to do so. Instead, Cinderella shows us a story about understanding one's self-worth, working towards your goal, in this case freedom, and being patient for the opportunities which will allow you to make that come true. And just like real life, you're not going to get it the first time around. So have faith that you'll be able to try again. It's scary to fail, 100%, but just have faith and things will work out better than you had initially hoped. Now, if that's not a message you want your kids to learn, then I don't know what you want, because honestly, I cannot think of a more profound and motivating story. That is why it has been redone so many times in so many different ways. So, I'm not here telling you specifically what Disney's Cinderella from 1950. No. Nor am I saying that this version of the Cinderella story is the best version out there. Because for me, that's not true. But every child needs to know one version of the story at least. And if you can't find any other version of the story, then Disney's 1950 Cinderella is a good option. Other than the creepy king side plot and the suddenness of the romance between Cinderella and Prince Charming, I don't think there's anything else that I can fault in the story. But that's just my opinion. I mean, I grew up with the version from 101 Nights, but it isn't my favorite version. In fact, my favorite version is the 2023 Japanese live-action movie of My Happy Marriage. But maybe we can talk about that movie another time. Here, it's all about the OG animated Cinderella movie. So that's
Cinderella, Cinderella, night and day it's Cinderella.
If this has put you in the mood to rewatch the Disney classic, then please use a streaming platform that doesn't support the violation of human rights or the spread of negativity in the world. If you like this video, please like it and share it to any other Disney fans out there. Next week, we're going to be having more Del Toro Quest content, so we'll see you there. Be brave, be happy, and be kind, and we'll catch you all next time.